Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, small law firm in central Minnesota. Look, guys, today I wanted to put out a quick video on Cody Wilson. Cody Wilson, of course, is the owner, CEO of Defense Distributed. He is the creator of the Liberator 3D printable gun. He has been massively in the news lately because, of course, he is engaged in a lawsuit with 22 states attorneys generals. I've talked about it on this channel. You know my positions on that lawsuit as it stands right now. But in a breaking development, not breaking now, surely you've heard about this, Cody Wilson has been charged with sexual assault in the state of Texas. And he fled initially to Taiwan. Well, I shouldn't say he fled. There are allegations that he fled. Otherwise, there are allegations that he had an existing trip to Taiwan. And whatever the case was, he missed his return flight home. We're going to talk about that a little bit here. But got kind of a new layout going here. So let me point you around the screen. Right below me is the actual statute he is charged under. The highlighted sections are relevant. Next to me is the document, the affidavit for the arrest warrant. We'll go through that in just a minute. But let's talk about the statute real quick. He's charged under the Texas Penal Code, section 22.011, which encompasses all sexual assault. He is charged particularly under section 2A, well, A2A, lowercase a to uppercase a. And the relevant part of this statute reads, regardless of whether the person knows the age of the child at the time of the offense, the person intentionally or knowingly causes the penetration of the anus or sexual organ of a child by any means. That is sexual assault. It is very straightforward in this case. Is the person a minor? In this case, the person is alleged to be 16 years old. That is a minor in the state of Texas. That is below the age of consent. And so the question simply boils down to, did Cody Wilson knowingly or intentionally cause the penetration of the anus or sexual organ of this child by any means? By any means means by any means. It does not have to be genital to genital contact, for example. It simply means that they cause penetration. So let's talk a little bit about this document. This is the affidavit for the arrest warrant. This describes kind of the evidence that's against Cody. It is a couple pages long. Bear with me. Let's go through it. I'm not going to read every single word. If you want to, you'll probably be able to read them by pausing the video. But let's get to the important stuff. The affiant is Sean Donovan, a peace officer certified by the state of Texas, who is currently employed as a detective with the Austin Police Department. There's a bunch of credentials. Great. Following information is based on victim and witness statements, affiant's personal knowledge, and information contained in the Austin Police Department report. On August 22nd, 2018, officers with the Austin Police Department responded to a call for service from a counselor who'd stated that a client, a juvenile female under the age of 17, it is later released that this was a 16-year-old. Okay, that was released by at a press conference by one of the Austin police officers. Under the age of 17, advised her she had sex with a 31-year-old male on August 15, 2018, and was paid $500. APD child abuse detectives received the report and scheduled a forensic interview at the Center for Child Protection on August 27, 2018. Your affiant attended the forensic interview, which was conducted by Grace Moon, a certified forensic interviewer employed by the Center for Child Protection. The juvenile female, who is fully identified in the report and hereafter will be referred to as victim, told the forensic interviewer she had sex with a 31-year-old male at a hotel in Austin, Texas, and was paid $500 by him. So then it goes into how this happened. Let me summarize that. The victim the 16-year-old victim, created a profile on a website called Sugar Daddy's Meet. She met with the alleged assailant, Cody Wilson, under his screen name Sanjuro. They exchanged messages. We do not have the contents of those messages, okay? So this is kind of an important part from the, not from a legal standpoint, but from the public perception standpoint. They've not released the details of these messages. Specifically, what they have not released about the details that would be interesting for the public perception would be whether or not Cody Wilson was aware that this person was 16 years old. To sign up on sugardaddymeet.com, you do have to affirm that you are 18 years of age or older. So the 16-year-old victim did misrepresent her age intentionally by clicking the agree button or whatever, representing that she was 18. Now, it is entirely possible that in the exchanges of messages or phone calls or whatever Cody Wilson exchanged with the victim, that she identified herself as something less than 18 years old. We do not know. Let me be very clear. In the state of Texas, there is not a defense that you were wrong about the age of the person, even if they lied to you, even if they produce just a litany of evidence to convince you that they are 18 years or older. If they are under the age of 17 in Texas, you are done. There's no defense under the law. You can try and convince a jury, you can make your case, but the instructions for sexual assault, I read to you the criminal code, and the instructions go basically like this. Was the victim under the age of 17? Did the alleged assailant, did the defendant, cause penetration of the anus or sex organ of the victim, intentionally or knowingly? Those two questions are what determine guilt in Texas. There's no caveat. There's no exception to it. There's very little you can do in the way of defense. The only defense is we did not have intercourse. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So the victim's parents consented for the Austin Police Department to search the victim's phone. There they saw the messages between her and Cody Wilson. They looked up the profile picture, matched them up. Some of the messages are laid out, are paraphrased here, where basically Cody described himself as a big deal to the victim. She did not know who she was, but she did find him on the internet. So then the long story short is they met at a coffee house. Cody Wilson picked her up. He used Defense Distributed's authorized vehicle, allegedly. I should say he allegedly used, although they do say that they have surveillance footage showing Cody Wilson and this girl entering and exiting the vehicle at multiple locations. So it seems like they have a strong case. Of course, they could be wrong. The video could be someone else. All of those caveats aside, that's why we're using allegedly here. It is entirely possible that this was someone who merely resembles Cody Wilson on a grainy sort of surveillance video, but I haven't seen the video. I haven't seen the pictures, but they state that they have them, and that is enough for an arrest warrant for sure. I'm sure Cody Wilson's lawyers will be looking to get all of that evidence and see if any of it can be suppressed. But yes, they used a company vehicle that was registered to Defense Distributed by its license plate. They then went to a hotel, parked in the hotel, went up to a room. This is all on surveillance video, checking in at the hotel, walking through the lobby, walking through the hallway. Of course, they enter the hotel room. There's not surveillance video from inside the hotel room for pretty obvious reasons. They don't take surveillance inside hotel rooms. This is where the victim alleged they had sexual intercourse, and later they left. Apparently, after the sexual intercourse, Cody gave her 5 $100 bills. Now, some people would argue that that is a payment in a sort of prostitution manner. Other people would state that sugar daddy meet is some sort of private escort hookup where you pay for the company of the person. It's kind of a common loophole for prostitution where you pay for company, and sexual intercourse may naturally occur on the completely normal date. This is a thing that goes on in many, many states. And it's hard to directly charge with prostitution because they have typically no understanding that they are paying money for sexual intercourse. And oftentimes if they try and do that, the escort will leave immediately, things like that. So importantly, Cody Wilson is not charged with any sort of prostitution thing. To my knowledge, I have not seen anything about the alleged victim being charged with a prostitution crime either. So either the cops just don't want to do that charge because they think it'll mess up the sexual assault charge, although it shouldn't, or they don't have enough evidence that there is an actual prostitution worthy exchange. They can't prove the elements of prostitution in Texas. One of those scenarios could be the case there. So this detective did go through the video. He reviewed all the video from the hotel. Excuse me. So Cody then allegedly drove her to a Whataburger restaurant, and the detective viewed the video surveillance from the Whataburger restaurant. And guys, if you don't think you're being watched, they had surveillance at the coffee shop, they had surveillance at the hotel, and they had surveillance at the Whataburger. So the government was able to access all of these videos and piece together the evening's events. Basically, the conclusion of this affidavit is that the affiant has substantially corroborated the victim's statement made during a forensic interview. So, as far as they know, they have no. They believe that Cody Wilson did sleep with this girl and did therefore violate the law, as she stated. Cody will, of course, get to raise his defense. He will get to challenge evidence. He will get to make the statement that he did or did not sleep with her. That's really, I can't stress this enough. If you're looking for how you defend yourself in this situation, the only defense is not having sexual intercourse with the victim. You just can't get around it. The other defense would be that you didn't knowingly or intentionally cause penetration, which would be some sort of rape scenario or something like that. Highly unlikely, usually, that would happen, but theoretically possible. Absolutely. I don't think we have any indication that would be the case here, but who knows what Cody would suggest. I will politely and humbly suggest that being intoxicated or on some sort of mind-altering substance probably won't play very well as a defense either. It could be a defense that Cody says he wasn't in charge of his facilities because of all these things, but he was also driving around. He seemed to be making conscious decisions about where they were going and stuff like that. So that would be a very tough defense as well in this case. There's nothing really here. Oh, so here is the recommendation from the state, and this is what was done. $150,000 bond with GPS tracking, no contact for Cody Wilson. That's between him and the alleged victim, and then surrender passport. Of course, prior to this arrest warrant being executed, Cody Wilson did leave to Taiwan. I mentioned that. Taiwan does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. I don't know if Cody Wilson bought his ticket to Taiwan in anticipation of these charges or anything like that. But he did go to Taiwan, not allegedly. He went to Taiwan. There is no extradition treaty with the United States. However, them not having an extradition treaty doesn't mean that they're not going to extradite a felon to the United States, or an accused felon, I should say. Cody Wilson's passport was revoked by the United States. It was ordered in this arrest warrant that he would surrender his passport. When that didn't happen, they had it revoked. With the passport being revoked, he was in the country of Taiwan, technically illegally, so the Taiwan police arrested him. They did not have to send him back to the United States. But when you're a country the size of Taiwan and you're dealing with the United States, who is a major trade partner and a large part of your economy, you're probably going to return a high-profile criminal that is arrested in your country. So there was probably some negotiation between the State Department of the United States, the State Department of Taiwan, and the state of Texas. Would have all had some say in that and talking about how they get Cody Wilson back to the United States. He has arrived back in the United States. He was brought to Houston, Texas, arrested at the Harris County Jail, and was transferred to Austin. The timeline is fuzzy for me on whether I believe he did get there. And they did post, someone posted the $150,000 bond for him, I believe at the Travis County Courthouse. And at the time of the last article I read, he was waiting to be released on his bond. I assume by now, that was hours ago that article was written. I assume by now he has been released on that bond and is presumably free to be within the state of Texas and not to leave, and probably to have GPS tracking and all of that stuff that comes with these charges. So that's where Cody sits right now. He is accused of having sex with a minor. Again, we don't know if he knew that this was a minor or not. I will say that the police commander officer, last name of this guy is actually Officer. So he went from officer to detective officer to sergeant officer to lieutenant officer to commander officer. I don't know if that's the right order. Don't at me, bro. But anyway, he is now commander officer. He has stated that he sent his detectives to interview the victim, presumably this affiant, and that detective has stated that anyone mistaking this victim's age would mistake her for being younger than 16, not older than 16. Guys, take that with an absolute grain of salt for a couple reasons. You dress differently than when you're going on a date than when someone's coming to your, or when you're going to meet up with a cop to interview them, or to be interviewed and have questions at the Child Protective Services Center. You know, you might wear all sorts of different clothing in those two instances. You might style your hair differently. You might wear makeup to one and not the other. So whether or not she looked 18 at the time that she was with Cody Wilson is a different question than whether or not she looked 18 when she was potentially facing prostitution charges and brought in to tell the story of how she slept with a man who, you know, technically assaulted her. Okay, so don't put any stock in what the police say there. Cody Wilson may have intended to sleep with a minor, and if he did, he's toast. Well, I mean, he's probably toast anyway. He's probably toast anyway. But with the public perception bit, the optics of it for him, you know, there's going to be some questions as to whether or not he intentionally had sex with a minor under the age of 17, or whether he was under the impression that she was older than that. It doesn't ultimately matter under Texas law. It matters only in public perception, and the way that sex crime charges are levied against people prior to them being convicted, mind you, is a little disingenuous. For example, Commander Officer said the following. I might get a little bit wrong in the quote, but here's the essential paraphrases. In Texas, if you intend to have sex with a minor child, there are severe consequences. Okay, now what he's saying is, if you intend to have sex with the victim and the victim is a minor child, then there are severe consequences. This is a true statement, but the way it's worded implies that the person was intending to have sex with a minor. We don't know if that was Cody Wilson's intent or not. We don't have any release of the messages. Maybe that was his intent, maybe not. You know, if they release those messages, or if those messages come out as part of discovery, and it's just repeated assurances from this girl that she's 18 years or older, that's going to be a completely different look for Cody Wilson than if it's, hey baby, I lied, I'm only 16, want to hang out and do Netflix and chill, right? There's vastly different public perception to those two scenarios. So we might get that information, we might not. There's a minor involved in the case, so there's going to be a lot of confidentiality, a lot of sealed documents. We might get a chance to see those messages as part of evidence if they're redacted, if the name is redacted to protect the minor child. Don't know. Since she was probably operating under a screen name, they might not have to redact it, but I guess it depends on the screen name, right? So who knows? We will watch and see how that develops. Final thoughts. How does this affect Defense Distributed's case? It really doesn't affect Defense Distributed's case. I guess they could delay it or something, as Cody is a named party. However, Cody Wilson could appoint a new representative of Defense Distributed. They have an attorney who's representing both him and the company. And there are good reasons why he cannot make court appearances. So that case theoretically should carry on in federal court. This doesn't affect the outcome of that case. In theory, there might be, again, some perception biases that come in based on this into the judge. They'd be very hard to identify and prove outside of a specific statement. So we'll have to proceed with that case under the assumption that everything will be just going as normal, and this case will be unrelated. It's an unrelated addendum. Him committing this crime, him even murdering people, doesn't change the facts of that case, and it doesn't impact the outcome of that case. So I just wanted to clear that up. Oh, and someone asked if this was a case of parallel construction, or they said that some people have alleged it's a case of parallel construction. A parallel construction is where you're prosecuting for one crime under a set of facts for a different crime. It's like a parallel processing, right? We're going after you for this, but we only have facts for this. Even if so, even if that were the case, they have a well-pleaded charging document here. It's not really a pleading because it's a criminal case, but they have a well written and apparently well cited charging document, lots of evidence and verification from the detective. So unless the detective is completely lying on some of the important parts, which is, don't get me wrong, absolutely possible that a cop would lie, and it doesn't always happen. And in this case, there's pretty much a mountain of evidence worthy of charging Cody Wilson with the crime. Whether or not he'll be found guilty, I assume he'll be working out a plea deal on this one, because unless there's some game-changing evidence to come out, he doesn't stand much of a chance in Texas court on this case. The only weird thing, this is the absolute final thought, the weirdest thing for me is that, so Cody Wilson fled to Taiwan, or I shouldn't say fled. He went to Taiwan. He may have fled to Taiwan. He may have not, but I've got minor conflicting reports. One report said that he went to Taiwan after being tipped off about the upcoming charges. He went to Cody Wilson and tell him to get out of Dodge. But, you know, I don't know the details of their relationship, how long they've been chatting or anything like that, or if the other girl felt bad and wanted to warn him. Who knows? Who knows? But the other side of that story is that maybe she told him about the charges while he was already in Taiwan. That's what one of the articles I read said. Most of the others said that he was warned prior to going to Taiwan. Doesn't really matter. Missing the return flight without a good reason and trying to rent an apartment in Taiwan and staying at hotels past his return flight. All of that kind of looks like he's staying away. Whether or not they'll charge him with attempting to flee the country is a different question. don't know. But surprisingly, his bond was still posted at $150,000, and he'll presumably be released. Now, they could decide that that bond should be higher because of the flee attempt, but I haven't seen anything about that yet. Okay, so I will be following this case as best I can and keep you guys posted. So please come back and check. If you run into anything, if you have any questions about it, DM me on Twitter. I'm happy to answer questions, speculate with you guys. But I can tell you, I'm not going to go through all the case law because the cases go all the way back to 1909 on this stuff in Texas. But let me just trust me on this. I've checked all of the defenses for age, and there are none. Okay, so going all the way back to 1909, if it simply matters if the victim is under the age of consent in Texas at the time. Again, that's 17. That's not legal advice, by the way. If you're thinking of sleeping with a 17-year-old in Texas, I suggest checking that out with a Texas attorney. But for the purposes of this high-level conversation and Cody Wilson's case specifically, under 17 is a no-no. All right, that's how I can put it. So, but going all the way back to 1909, every single time and every single defense that has been brought up about the age of the child being misrepresented, outright lied about, even with convincing proof and stuff like that, or simply the person not knowing the age of consent was 16 where somewhere else it was, or was 17 where somewhere else it was 16, for example. None of those are defenses. Ignorance of the law is not a defense. Ignorance of the age is not a defense. And even being maliciously lied to about the age of the victim is not a defense. So the Texas courts are very, very serious about this charge, and they very, very much intend to enforce it. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. This video is a couple days late. Been very busy, but I really appreciate it watching. I really appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, please come talk to me. Otherwise, see you around. We'll be covering a bunch more. Have a nice night. Peace.